For the final time this season, you're most welcome to the Matchbook NFL Betting Podcast. Delighted to be joined, as ever, by three of the best in the game. Mr. Drew Dinsick at the top right of your screen. If you're watching us now live on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter, Mr. Rob Pizzola with his brand new shock jock setup. He is joined. Look, he's seen Drew's set up all the last couple of seasons. He's relented. He is big time now. He's a media personality. I love it. Fabian Sommer from Western Germany. We ain't got that far yet, Suma. We aren't invited on enough of these shows yet. But in time, we will get our shock jock setups, buddy. We'll get it. We will come in time. So what we're going to do today, folks, if you're watching us now live, please do get in touch. There's a whole lot of props, obviously, out there in the market. There's going to be a lot of Matchbook. If they're not a Matchbook, we will answer those ones as well. Does not matter. We want to hear what your thoughts are, because there are a lot, and there are a lot to get through. But if you want the opinions of the guys on the bets that you think may have the value, please do get in touch. But before we get into props, have a think about the props in the meantime. We're going to talk about the actual game, because that's what we do every NFL podcast. And let's look at the lines. The lines have been there for the last couple of weeks. Not a lot has moved, maybe small bit on the total, but we'll talk about that in a second. 1.63, you can back the Kansas City Chiefs. Tampa Bay Buccaneers at 2.55. The Chiefs are laying 3 at 1 point, just under 1.96. I recommend that's quite good, actually. I was looking on the sports books, a lot of them are about 1.89, 1.9 at the moment. 55 is the total. That opened around 56.5, 57. Drew Dinsick, kick us off, mate. Like we said, it's an exceptionally efficient market. Early thoughts on this one. What are you thinking?
Yeah, who knew they could get the Super Bowl price right?
Yeah.
This is shocking. Yeah, I think, I know from the handicapping the side, handicapping the total, I think, this is a game this is a matchup, the way these teams play, the way the Chiefs play, really. I think we've seen enough. We've got enough evidence that really the best way to attack this, if you're trying to make a profit on the side of the total, is to attack this in game, in running, at halftime, depending on how the game state unravels. Because, in the path of possible game states, there's a pretty broad array here. If Tampa Bay gets out to a lead, you're almost certainly going to get a very favorable price on the Kansas City Chiefs live. You're going to get a very favorable price on an over. And similarly, if the Chiefs have a lead, we saw in the first game, they were able to take minutes and minutes off the clock, didn't really threaten to run up the score, didn't really try to win with margin. Tampa Bay scored quickly, through the air, because they have the weapons and they have they have a defense that can absolutely stone the run. And so, I think both teams will have opportunities to come back from a deficit here. So any type of live opportunity on a dog is going to be solid. And any type of live number you get, if let's say Tampa Bay scores, let's say they score 7-10 points in the first quarter and they have a nice little lead, you're going to get a really nice deflated total. Especially if it's field goals, not touchdowns, in general, early going. And I think you're gonna have a nice opportunity to enter live on the over, and then vice versa. If Kansas City has a solid lead as we get into, as the game starts to mature, you're gonna have a nice live position on the under. As far as matchups go, Tampa Bay's defense does not really have an answer for the speed of Tyreek Hill and Mecole Hardman. They do not really have a matchup for Travis Kelce, although no one in the NFL does. So to expect that Tampa Bay's defense is going to hold Kansas City down and really win this ugly, I think is unrealistic. That's probably the one game state that I would say you can probably give the lowest likelihood by a lot. So Tampa Bay, if they're live in this one, and if they're going to have a chance to win, they're going to have to do it with scoring. So I guess if you evaluate that side of the ball, if you evaluate Tampa Bay's offense against Kansas City's defense, and you feel that they have a good potential to get to 30-something points, then they're live in this game. But I personally think Kansas City's defense is a little underrated. I think Chris Jones, especially his ability to kind of give Tom Brady interior pressure, which has been his Achilles heel for as long as he's been in this league. And Steve Spagnuolo, who, by the way, put together the blueprint that stopped the 2007, Patriots juggernaut. I mean, these guys know how to disguise their looks to really, try to get the worst out of Brady, for lack of a better term. And so when the dust settles, I do think Kansas City is going to be our Super Bowl champion. I would make it a little, I guess I would make it 3.5, but I don't mind laying the 3. It's a very tight market, and I respect the idea that Tampa Bay could look good early because they have the advantage in the trenches on both sides of the ball. Their offensive line is the better unit, absolutely by a long shot, especially given the attrition and the injuries to the Kansas City offensive line. And their defensive line is full of studs, and it's pretty likely that kind of those big bodies early are going to win their 1v1s, and Tampa Bay could look good out of the gate here. So I think if I had to crystal ball this one, I think you're talking about Tampa Bay, probably a pretty typical Pat Mahomes, Kansas City Chiefs playoff game, actually, where the Chiefs are down early, and at some point the dam breaks, and you just want to be there for that opportunity live, in my opinion.
Yeah, bet Chiefs money line, bet the over. Rob Pizzola, as we said, Drew kind of covered the side there pretty comprehensively. The market is very efficient. However, there has been a bit of a move for the under in the last couple of days, and pretty serious enough move to bring it down through to 55. And you reckon it goes further? Have you heard anything about this, or is it one that you'll be kind of aligned with?
Well, I was aligned with the original move. Now, I didn't play the under in this game because when you make a game 55 and the total is at 56 or 56.5, you really don't have enough of an edge there to overcome the actual VIG to bet the under. So someone who's betting the under probably has this line closer to 52, 53, where there's enough of a margin here that they come in on the under. We've seen this a lot in the NFL this year with high totals, just in general. A lot of them where we scratch our heads and we say, why is there money coming in on the under? I think back to Green Bay, Tennessee, which it was later on in the year. But typically anything above 55 draws money towards the under. And I understand why. After watching a lot of these games just in general, I know what both teams have this offensive firepower, and that's what we think about. But it takes like 1 7-minute drive where they settle for a field goal or potentially go for it on fourth down and don't convert, and the over's cooked in that game. Especially knowing this is the Super Bowl, I think both teams play this where they don't want to allow big plays in general. I think that leads to longer extended drives that take a little bit more time off the clock. So I see the reasoning for it. I could not play a total over this high right now because just almost everything needs to go right in order for that to happen. So, if I was playing at 55, I think that's kind of the perfect number. Like Drew said off the top, it's shocking that we'd kind of get like this perfect Super Bowl number. That's pretty much where I made it, -3, just over 55. I think I was at like 55.3 or something like that. But I understand why naturally market would gravitate to the under here, despite the offensive firepower.
Yeah, look at last year's Super Bowl. 20 points in the first half, a lot of slow play, just killed it in the third quarter, didn't help things either. Suma, I know you've got a few Tampa Bay outright positions. So what are you doing on Sunday night? Have you kind of hedged out on the Chiefs a bit, or what's your general tactic? You're muted, Suma.
Oh, Suma.
Yeah, you got to unmute yourself.
Mistake. Sorry, guys.
We'll get him next year.
That's for sure.
So I'm just going to try to hedge a little bit on KC so that ticket is not going to be empty on Sunday. But other than that, to what Drew and Rob said, I think the interesting part when it comes to the total is that I think that both defenses might be a little bit underrated in this one because Steve Spagnuolo is going to bring heat all game long, is what I believe, because they have a pretty aggressive nature on defense, kind of like complementing their aggressive offense. And as soon as opposing quarterbacks are empty, he brings 7 guys no matter what. And I think this is probably the best way to attack Tom Brady, to make him kind of uncomfortable because, as Drew said, Tampa Bay should have the edge at the line of scrimmage. So the best way to get pressure on Brady is probably blitzing. And then it just depends on whether those receivers can win their one-on-one matchups. And on the other side, the Chiefs are playing without both starting tackles, which should be an issue in this game. I know we are talking about Patrick Mahomes. They are going to call lots of RPOs, which kind of negates those weaknesses at tackle. But as soon as Patrick Mahomes has to drop back, like on 2nd and long and 3rd and long, we have a stout 4-man rush with Vita Vea back, who is going to get after Mahomes, just like the Niners did in the last Super Bowl, in my opinion. And then Todd Bowles can tell his guys to sit back and cover those zones and cover Tyreek Hill a little bit deep. And that could make it very uncomfortable for the Chiefs. And we are not talking about uncomfortable to the point that they won't put together any scoring drives, but maybe we see a score that was in the area of the last Super Bowl, and that wouldn't surprise me at all. But on the other side, we are still talking about Patrick Mahomes and Tom Brady, and they might win some ways to score touchdowns, and we could be talking about the low 60s here on Sunday. So that wouldn't surprise me either, but I can definitely get behind some of those underthoughts.
Okay, guys, just before we come off this, and I know you probably haven't played this. Rob, I'll come to you first. Look, going to head, man, 3 is the line. If you had to bet, and I know you're probably not going to bet it, but just for the kind of interest of the viewers out there, which side would you take if you had to have a bet?
I've actually changed my opinion since the week started. I would bet the Bucks right now if I could.
Okay.
If I had to take a side. And I honestly thought Kansas City and Buffalo was the Super Bowl that week. When that game was happening, as I said, this is really the Super Bowl versus what we might see next week. But in rewatching the first Kansas City Tampa Bay game from earlier this year, I feel like a lot of people will look at that game, and I think the Bucks got incredibly unlucky. Like Brady's first couple interceptions were both tipped at the line of scrimmage. Mike Evans dropped a deep ball. They were missing their left tackle on the offensive line as well. Like a lot of things really went against Tampa Bay in that game that I think allowed Kansas City to get out to an early lead for the most part and never look back. I think it's going to be closer. I mean, I don't like the game, but if you're asking me to pick, and I'm going to be picking in some spread pools for myself this week, I'm going to be taking the Bucks.
Drew, Chiefs, you, man?
Yeah, a couple closing thoughts, I guess. I personally think this will ultimately boil down to the coaching mismatch. Tampa Bay is here in spite of their coaching. I mean, they're here because they're so flipping talented. Every person on this roster, even Brady at 43, is his arm still has talent, and they've gotten here kind of in spite of some bad decision making, some bad scheming, and even to Suma's point, like I was listening to Suma break down how Todd Bowles could attack. That's correct. 100% agreed. Do not blitz, please. Like if Todd Bowles rolls out sort of the aggressive style of blitzing with the linebackers that we've seen in games past early in this contest, live bet the Chiefs. It's over. Honestly, I think, but I don't have confidence really in the way that they've game planned overall this whole season that you're going to get an A+ game plan out of Bruce Arians, Todd Bowles, Byron Leftwich. Like these guys leave a lot of advantage on the table, and even with the more talented roster, top to bottom, I do think that the coaching is going to eventually bite them. I mean, just even last, like, okay, the NFC Championship game specifically. How did the Bucks win that? The Bucks won that in spite of the fact that they went run, pass for their entire first drive, right? 3rd and long consistently on that drive. But guess what? Brady came into that game and his plan A was, well, if it's 3rd and long, I'm going to attack Kevin King because I know he stinks. And guess what? That worked to perfection the entire first half of that game, right? I don't think you can actually look at this Chiefs defense in the same way where you have a clear, obvious plan A of, okay, well, if the going gets tough and I'm at 3rd and long, this is what I'm going to do, because the Chiefs defense is much more complex in terms of what you're actually getting on any given snap. You can't diagnose it as cleanly pre-snap as you can a team like the Green Bay Packers. And Brady thrives. Absolutely. His best games and his strongest performances are when he has a good idea of what the defense is going to do pre-snap. And that is going to be somewhat of an advantage here. I mean, the fact that Brady's going to have a clean pocket for the most of the night because their offensive line is so superlative that's surely going to keep them in this game. But the defense that the Bucs are trotting out there is not as good as last year's San Francisco defense, even at the talent level that they have. At some point you can't expect to hold the Chiefs down for 4 quarters. We've learned this lesson the hard way every single week in, week out. You cannot hold them down. So it's going to be incumbent upon Tampa Bay to go score for score, to get some kind of lead. Because honestly, like I'll ask you guys this: what lead is safe, right? Tampa Bay is winning by X points going into the 4th quarter, and you feel highly confident that they're going to win the game.
You never do.
20 points?
20, yeah, I'd say
17.
3 touchdowns. Yeah.
3 touchdowns.
17-20, yeah.
So realistically, I don't know. I mean, I either they get there then 42-21, which means they're scored 42 points going into the fourth quarter, or they hold the Chiefs under 21 through 3 quarters, which is going to be tough. And it's at some point the dam's going to break. Mahomes can hit home runs. His, he's got an absolutely fully healthy set of weapons to work with in this one. In the passing game, especially. So it's going to be a great game. I'm very excited to see it. And I guess I would still hold that ultimately the Chiefs win. And if you have a strong position on the under, I mean, just have some of your bankroll in pocket to take a free crack live on some live overs if the Bucs get out to a lead, because that's the problem of playing a Chiefs under. I've learned this the hard way. Yeah. Chiefs unders look good. They look good until they are at a deficit. Think back to like the AFC title game with Brady and Mahomes. That was 14-3 at halftime. Dead nut under. No problem. No question. And it ends with 67 something points. I mean, it was in the 60s. It ended. And the top can come off so quickly because of the way that they hit home runs. It's like you're betting under on the Yankees under 6. And one inning they score 7. That's kind of the weird dynamic you're dealing with this team, which is different than most NFL games. And so even if you do have a strong edge on the under, and heck, last year's Super Bowl landed on 51. This year's game landed on 51. Lots of Chiefs. There's been lots of Chiefs games that have landed on 51 where they win by 3, and it's because they just kind of put the ball away comfortably in the fourth quarter because they come in with the lead. That is entirely a reasonable game state here. But if it goes the other way and Tampa Bay is playing with the lead, then the top's going to come off at some point, and you better be ready to play a live over.
Yeah, and I hate to go back to, but last year's Super Bowl, exact same situation. That was the play in running at halftime. I think you go back 27.5 in the total. Bang, boom. And so, Sumo, quickly before we come off the main game, gun to head, mate. 3 is the line. Which one are you playing? Bucs plus or Chiefs minus?
Gun to my head, KC -3.
Really?
But really just gun to my head. I think
that's okay.
We
put the guns away. The gun wasn't loaded. So we're fine. Let's just take a couple of comments here before we get on to the props, guys. Like I said, if you have any questions about the props, we're going to just rattle through a few of the player positions and see where you're going from here. GF Sports Trading being in touch. He says the Chiefs' offensive line holds up. They win doing handstands. I'd like to see that. Brady's last 4 games, teams with Spagnuolo's defense coordinator, 1 win versus 3 losses. Yeah, I've got a kind of a couple takes with that as well later on. But yeah, no, it is a very real thing. Look, he knows that he has to get pressure up the middle rather than some D coordinators taking pressure around the edge. Doesn't work. He's going to step up the pocket and he's going to kill you there. Clint Richardson has been touched. Vita Vea solo and assist tackles over 1.5 seems too easy. I don't know if any of the guys have any thoughts on that one. I actually don't, to be honest.
I agree with that over because Ndamukong Suh eats 2 blockers on every snap. So Vita Vea gets to shine.
Are the Chiefs ever going to try to run the ball up the middle? Is my only concern. I mean, it's a low number, but I would agree with the over, but I don't know that the Chiefs are coming out trying to run up the middle at all.
Yeah, and he says he makes the point of Tampa Bay will be playing more cover 2 this time around. One comment in from our friend in Italy, but I guess win. Buonasera, Signor Greco, isn't it Greco?
Yeah, that's great.
Tom Brady in one regards from Italy. We do love your stuff. Keep sending us those videos, mate. It looks really cold when he takes off his top. It's so weird. Whoever follows him on Twitter will know exactly what I talking about. But as Suma says, the guy knows he's Serie A football, so keep an eye on that. He does have some good picks every weekend. Okay, guys, let's move on. Let's talk about the props. Let's talk about the quarterbacks first of all. Rob Pizzola, I want to come to you one here because we were chatting in our WhatsApp group early on the weekend. You want to kind of link this back with the MVP market. And you believe the top 2 in that market every year are obviously quarterbacks, but you still believe there's a bit of value in maybe dutching both of them.
Yeah, I think you look at the winning position of the Super Bowl MVP, and quarterback is -350 right now. And one thing I think is very important when you're betting on props is to convert these odds to percentages, and it makes things a lot more clearer for you in general. So if you convert -350 to an implied probability, that's 77.8%. That to me is extremely low for a quarterback winning the Super Bowl in this game. And when you start accounting for the way that the MVP works, 80% of the vote is from beat writers, 20% is from fans. The stories are going to be centered around Mahomes and Brady here heavily. Like it's going to take, in my opinion, an extreme performance from someone outside of the quarterback position to win it. If you look back to last year's Super Bowl, I mean, there's a very strong argument to be made that Patrick Mahomes should not have won the MVP last year from a statistical standpoint. Yeah. But honestly, like the game was over and it was never in question for me that he was going to win it because we know how this tends to go down. I don't think defensive and special teams players are very live anymore, especially not special teams with the way that obviously special teams has changed over the course of the years, I should say. Total of 55. Even if a defensive touchdown gets scored, there's still a very realistic chance that either quarterback's putting up 3 or 4 touchdown passes, which I think offsets that. So I'm looking at winning position quarterback. I don't necessarily know that who's going to win, the Chiefs or the Bucks, but 77.8%. Like this to me is a prop that should be closer to 90%. In terms of where it should be lined, because I'm not saying it can't happen, but what it would take for someone else to actually win this is like 3 touchdown passes from Mahomes, all to Travis Kelce, all to Tyreek Hill.
And even then though, Rob, it's 3 touchdown passes from Mahomes. So like, you know,
and the last point I'll make is that these quarterbacks spread it around. Like, there's going to be a lot of people involved in the offense on both of these teams where I think, unless you get one of those running back performances where they pop in 3 touchdowns from short yardage or something like that, and the Brady or Mahomes has one of those games where they just can't get it into the end zone, fine. But I'm willing to bet minus 350 that either of these guys is winning the MVP award. And I should say, the winning position quarterback also covers you in case either of the quarterbacks goes down due to injury, and the backup quarterback comes in. Because if a backup quarterback comes in and wins the Super Bowl, he's getting the MVP.
Clever, like that. But if that market isn't available to some of our viewers or listeners out there, Rob, like the kind of the old narrative is, if you want to back the Bucks on the money line at 2.55, would you not just back Tom Brady at 2.8 or 2.9 to win the Super Bowl? Because you're just getting a small bit more value. And let's be honest, going back to I know it was only 2 or 3 years ago, the Rams and the Pats, one of the worst Super Bowls ever. Edelman got the MVP then, but that was because we're not going to see a 13-3 game. It's not going to happen no matter what. Look, it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. Like if it does, we're shit out of luck in that one. But I mean, it generally is. And you know, same if you want to back the Chiefs, they're currently at 1.63 to win the money line, but you can back Mahomes at 1.9. There's a 10-11 shot, so you know it's a no-brainer.
I don't hate that. I had this conversation with a friend earlier this week because this is the Super Bowl. It's not like limits are low in general. Like, you can get a lot down on an MVP prop if you wanted to. So to me, like, I would almost rather play Patrick Mahomes plus 100 to win MVP than I would lay the juice with Chiefs money line. Like, I think there's value at that price just in general. If I like the Chiefs, I mean, I think people naturally are going to gravitate to long shots in this type of market because that's what they want to root for in the Super Bowl. And we've seen it happen before. Like we've seen Santonio Holmes 18-1. We've seen special teams players, defensive players win. And people are always looking for that long shot hit. But in this scenario, I think that because that's what people are looking for, it creates value on the quarterback position in general. So I think, Sully, you make a good point, and that if you like either of the teams on the money line in this game, you're probably better off betting the MVP. I think there's actually more value on the MVP than there is on the money line for either of those teams.
Yeah, I think you've answered Rob Rodriguez's question there in live on YouTube. Is Mahomes MVP a good hedge against Tampa Bay future? Like if it comes to it and Chad Henne comes in and wins MVP, that happens. Drew Dinsick, you liked a couple of Mahomes props. I think passing attempts was the one that stood out at you for you.
Yeah, and I guess just to kind of close the book on what you guys were mentioning, I would lean Mahomes over Chiefs money line more so than I would Brady over Bucks, just because in the pie wedge of possible people who can win, there's really only one Chief, but there's a lot of Bucks, really. I mean, yeah, and there's a tiny chance that Bucks win with defense, and Brady has an okay day. and he's distributing the ball across all these receivers, and no one's got an impressive stat line, and they're like sitting there in the fourth quarter, like waiting for a defensive player to make some huge play, strip sack, touchdown, or something like that, and they're going to vote for that guy, right? Like there's a weird outcome like that on if the Bucs win the game. But Mahomes and the Chiefs is, I think, pretty highly correlated. Mahomes, the other thing that I like to do in terms of process as far as picking at these prop markets, because don't get me wrong, if you're not a player prop handicapper, then it doesn't make a ton of sense for this game to roll around and really go wade into the water of the player props, right? If you haven't been doing this week in, week out, if you don't have a pretty good database of what these props typically open and close, not just for this game, but for past Super Bowls, right? You're flying blind, right? It's not the same as, handicapping a side or total where you have lots of data, you have a process. It's pretty, it's not really all that different for this one game than it would be for any other game during the regular season. But the player props, if you're going to wade into the market, you need a specific process, and you probably want to be very selective. I particularly like to look for props that are not dependent on what you think will happen in the game, right? So anything that is resilient to different game states, I think is a good play, right? You don't want to say, well, I like, the Bucs are going to do well in this game because they're going to target this player because he's got a great matchup. Therefore, I'm going to bet that player's overs, right? That's kind of the common way that people attack these. I think it's more important to look for, okay, well, if the Chiefs are doing well in this game, if they get out to a good lead, it's because Mahomes is throwing the ball all over the yard and it's working, right? And if the Chiefs are behind, Mahomes is going to throw the ball all over the yard and it's going to work. And Andy Reid is a smart coach, maybe one of the smartest, if not the smartest in the league right now. He is very acutely aware of how good Tampa Bay's run defense is. Best run defense in the league. And the idea that, Andy Reid is crafting a game plan that in any way counts on the run in this game, I find pretty laughable. And so the likelihood is this is going to be a high pass attempts game for Mahomes relative to an average Chiefs game, in my opinion. You have a high total on top of this. And you have a specific example of in season what happened when the Chiefs had a lead against this team. Because realistically, if you're betting a pass attempts over, which is what I would advocate for Mahomes, you're concerned about one game state, which is the Chiefs have a big lead in the fourth quarter. They just run, right? Well, you can go back and look at what happened in the Bucs game the first time around. In the fourth quarter, they went pass. Yeah. And it worked well. But you know why they did it? It's because they're not stupid. It's because they know that if they had just run into a brick wall, they were going to give Brady the ball back a bunch more times, and he was going to be able to score in 2 minutes, and he was going to actually potentially come back in that game. And so they realized, okay, well, let's pass to put this away. We know our Mahomes is accurate enough that his passes were completions, and they were continuing to take time off the clock. He was attacking the middle of the field, not the sidelines, so they weren't worried about him guys going out of bounds and stopping the clock. They took the easy stuff, and I would expect that that's a similar game plan and game state here. Whether the Chiefs are up or down in this one, I think Mahomes is getting into the high 40s with pass attempts, and I found 41 earlier this week. I'm seeing 41.5 right now as far as pass attempts for Mahomes out there. And realistically, the only thing I'm kind of worried about, which is, Rob scared me a little when he brought it up because I didn't want somebody to even speak it into existence. But if something happens to Mahomes, he gets hurt, then that's cooked. But you have to kind of live with that tail risk, I think.
Yeah. You live with that on any player prop in the Super Bowl or in any game in general. I think, Sully, Drew brings up a great point just in general about your portfolio management on props for the Super Bowl. And I've been down this path personally when I was younger before, where you tie all of your props to the outcome that you think is going to happen in the game. And then you end up like 10 times more exposed than you actually should be on the game, which can be a big win for you if all things go in your favor, but also could potentially be a big loss in general. So that's just a general piece of advice to people out there. Just because you like the Bucs in the game doesn't mean you have to bet every single one of the receivers over, Tom Brady over, or whatever. Like you then are like you're extending your risk so far beyond what it actually should be, just because you have all of these props available to you for the Super Bowl.
Suma, I know you're probably more interested in the wide receiver ones. I know there's one Kansas City player in particular that's kind of stood out for you. But any kind of thoughts to what the lads had there regards QB props? Any leans either ways?
Yeah, I actually like what Drew has said about the passing attempts, because the Chiefs are not going to run the ball. So we have Vita Vea back. We have 2 backup tackles. Andy Reid would be stupid to try to establish the run whatsoever. So I would expect a pass percentage that is above expectation for what we saw from the Chiefs during the regular season. And anything in the mid to high 40s would not surprise me at all. So I really like that passing attempts over prop.
All right, let's move on. Some good looks over the quarterbacks, plenty to get stuck into. Running backs. So I just want to share one tweet I got early on the week that I put it out on my own channel, and it did make a bit of sense to me from Mitch Thornton. He's saying here, all Kansas City running backs told, seems like outside of Mahomes, KC will have a difficult time running the ball inside the tackles. But what do I know, he says. But no, I think he's onto something. But the problem is, looking at a couple of these numbers, they're fairly low. Like Clyde Edwards-Helaire is 29.5. Jeez, something like this. Like, I don't know where you're going to go with that. You're betting unders on that. Who else is there? Even, I think there's like Darrell Williams is kind of in the 20s. Le'Veon Bell is kind of around that as well. Even I was kind of thinking there might be an angle there if you have a market, and I haven't seen this one, where the top Chiefs rusher, like if you got a decent enough price of Mahomes, albeit obviously he's coming off that injured toe, but he has had 2 weeks to rest it. Like, he could be more of a runner there than any of those guys, because they may not run the ball at all. Anyone have any thoughts on that? Because those numbers are low. And I mean, if you start betting all of those under, I don't know where it leads you, because the market kind of has adjusted accordingly.
Yeah, I mean, if I was going to target a Kansas City running back under, it would be Le'Veon Bell, because I don't think that there's any reason for him to even see the field in this game. He's just not providing that offense with anything that the other 2 running backs are right now. And I mean, he looks cooked. I think the Chiefs recognize that. So that would be the one that I would target. And then on the other side of the ball, I'm typically betting unders on player props in the Super Bowl for the most part. I think a lot of these end up being inflated, especially in a game like this where people expect scoring. But to me, the Leonard Fournette receiving yardage totals and reception numbers are actually a little bit low. I would go over on Leonard Fournette. He's been way more involved in the passing game. And I think if people look at the entire season and they look at the number of receptions Leonard Fournette has had and the number of games where he actually had 4 receptions, like, it's very low. But I think that's a big mistake in general. I think that's the way that the prop is priced by the trader. But I think if you look at recent game scripts and what the Bucs are likely to do in this game, it lends itself to Fournette being heavily involved in the passing game just in general, especially if the Chiefs are blitzing a lot. Brady's got to get the ball out quick. He looks for the running back. If you look at the playoffs so far on passing plays, Fournette's been on the field on 81% of those passing plays versus Ronald Jones only 19%. Like, if Ronald Jones is on the field, they're much more likely to run the ball. If Fournette's on the field, they could do either one, but it's it's more likely to be a pass just in general. So from a recency standpoint, I think Fournette is more heavily involved here than the overall season numbers would lend itself to. So whether that's the receiving yardage totals or the reception numbers, I think they're both low in the market right now.
That's pretty interesting, yeah, because he's total rushing attempts is 11.5. That line is kind of tilted towards the under, and that just seems pretty bang on. And if they do get behind, they're going to have to throw the ball. But we know with this Byron Leftwich offense that he is going to see the ball, generally speaking, if they have drives, first down, second down. Drew, any thoughts on these ones?
Yeah, if you want a little extra juice on that, on the Leonard Fournette, they have some of the most dynamic weapons in the passing game on the field, and yet they target Leonard Fournette. They haven't learned their lesson. They haven't had any consequence, so they're going to keep doing it. It's going to make me crazy. There are going to be times in this game where I'm going to want good football and good competitive action, and Tampa Bay's down, or Tampa Bay needs a score, and they're going to target Leonard Fournette, and it's going to bounce off his cement hands, and I'm going to scream at the television, "Why are you targeting this guy?" But Rob's right. They're going to do it. They'll do it again. They're crazy. So, yeah.
I think it's a bit of a Brady thing as well. Like Brady's
That's
always
true.
targeted running backs. And
Yeah,
I think
very
if you
true.
look at the Bucs offense prior to the bye this year, it really wasn't working for them, right? Like there's a lot of downfield stuff, and post bye, they started bringing in a lot of the Patriots' old plays. And I think since then, there's really been an emergence towards targeting the running backs. And yeah, I mean, you're reliant on Fournette catching the ball, which is unfortunate because like if you play receptions over, but I think he's going to get like 7 targets in this game. That's what I have him projected for.
The problem is if he drops the first one, Brady might just go.
He might not come back to
I'm
him,
not going back to you, buddy. Yeah, that is a tail risk in that one. But you're right. Ronald Jones is proven not to be at all, worthy in the passing game, and they don't really have any other options. So the likelihood that they do use Fournette in that role, and Brady does love it. So I think that's all valid.
Rob, just on that one, what I'm going to do, guys, if you're watching out there, and like I know we're kind of throwing out a few bets, I'm going to take note of all these, and there's going to be a post on insights.matchbook.com on Friday, just to kind of clarify if you just missed them. But Rob, 3.5 is his line for the receptions. Now it's juiced a bit to the over, and 26.5 is the yardage. So I know you could go both sides of that and take the over on either side, but is there any kind of side when you just hear that it might just kind of take your fancy?
I prefer the receptions number itself. Like I said, I think he's going to get 7 targets in the game. I'm projecting targets for each player. If he catches more than half of the targets, you're good there. I think that's the way to look at it. And especially, I do think that Kansas City is going to try to pressure Brady up the middle. I think that results in a lot of swing passes to the running back, just in general. So that's I prefer that than the yardage total.
Can I ask a question? I saw a matchup of Leonard Fournette pass receptions versus Scotty Miller pass receptions. Fournette was -2.5, pretty decent, taking a pretty decent limit on that. What do you have target wise for Scotty Miller?
I don't have them up in front of me.
Yeah.
But
give me 2 seconds. I'll find out for you what the general line is. I mean, look, Matchbook will offer some of these. They won't offer some, but we're not going to let that stop us doing a broadcast either. But yeah, look, I mean, Suma, just before I find that for Scotty Miller, have you any thoughts on the running backs, mate, or what way do you see this one playing out?
I actually like Rob's angle on Le'Veon Bell. What's his yardage number?
So I'll find that out as well. Just give me 2 seconds. But that's pretty low. Has to be. For rushing,
there's a legitimate chance that Le'Veon Bell doesn't, like, I think it's over a 50% chance he doesn't get a carry, right? I mean, that's just me. I think that the Chiefs coaching staff is pretty smart. I think we can all agree on that just in general. And if I'm predicting the Super Bowl, you're going to try to predict what these coaches are going to game plan. I don't see why a smart group of coaches would throw Le'Veon Bell in the backfield at this point.
They didn't trust him with the touch against the Buffalo Bills.
No.
And even in the second half, if the Chiefs have to run the ball or eat the clock, we're going to see some Darrell Williams and not really Le'Veon Bell, because he's more like the downhill runner that could get a couple of yards. So I don't really see that either.
Just on the Scotty Miller one, guys. So he's line receptions is 1.5 tilted to the under. So it's juiced to the under, and 14.5 is his receiving yards. And just on Le'Veon, he's not even listed on the main sports books in this side. They're too cute. They know that we just want to back this. So like that will tell you, like, if you're going to put up a line that's low, they'll probably just say, fuck it, we're just not going to want to offer this. So just move on. So that'll tell you with Le'Veon Bell for sure. That maybe look. If you're watching us now live and your offshore book has it, or one of the legal books in the state, have a look. Tell us what it is, and it may come live over the weekend. And if it's a kind of a decent enough line, Rob, what do you think? If they throw up like double digits, what are we just going to back under? Definitely on rushing anyway, because he's not going to see the ball rushing the ball.
I am projecting Le'Veon Bell for 0 rushing attempts and 0 rushing yards. So if you can get a number on Le'Veon Bell under rushing attempts or yards, it is a play.
Yeah, any number, it is a play, because it just won't get any. Love that. Let's move on. Wide receivers. Suma, you were kind of hot on one here, one of the Chiefs. Do tell, who is it?
Yeah, so I was checking some receiving props, and I thought the number on Sammy Watkins looked pretty small, because he's almost certainly to play. I think we should wait for those injury reports, whether he will practice fully. But I think I saw over 39.5 at plus 05. And I went through all his games with the Chiefs, and in 26 out of 38 games, he had 5+ targets. He's still their wide receiver too. So in the last 2 games against the Saints and Falcons, where he was healthy, he was easily their wide receiver too. I think against the Saints, he had 15 routes more run than the third wide receiver, DeMarcus Robinson. He's going to play. Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce might draw some double coverage on a few key downs. So I think there's going to be some space vacated for Sammy Watkins. And if I told you that Sammy Watkins' stat line for the Super Bowl would be 4 catches, 45 yards, and 0 touchdowns, I don't think that would be any bold prediction. I really like that 39.5 over plus 05. And in the comments, someone mentioned that it would be down to 35.5. So that would be even better. So
yeah, I can't bring that one up because he's promoting another sports book, but I've seen it. I know where it is.
He went 5 for 98 last year, and that was a surprise. People didn't expect him to be much part of the game plan against the Niners last year, and he was solid.
Well, I mean, just in generally speaking, if you're a defensive coordinator, right, Sammy Watkins is not going to be on your radar for someone that you're trying to shut down in this game. Like, it's how do we prevent Tyreek Hill from beating us over the top? How do we prevent Travis Kelce from catching 1 million 10-yard passes over the middle of the field, right? So I do like that. I mean, health is a concern, obviously. And you know, we haven't seen Watkins in a while, just in general at full strength. But that for me, for a wide receiver too, on a team that has the greatest quarterback of all time, in my opinion, not based off career longevity and career stats, but actual peak performance, that's a really low number for a wide receiver too.
Yeah. Full agreement there. There was one of the receivers being backed up, and his numbers getting kind of crazy. I looked at this at the start of the week. Tyreek Hill was 89.5, 90.5. I've seen some 94, 95. It's getting a bit ridiculous. And look, I think he was about 9 receptions and 97 yards in the Super Bowl last year. Barely got it because they were playing catch up, and he got a couple of big ones in the fourth quarter. But some of these Chiefs ones, I know it's gonna take a brave man to be back in the unders, Drew Dinsick, but it may be the way to go. Especially Tyreek Hill, you're probably gonna have to just close your eyes. They're kind of getting stupid numbers, aren't they?
Tyreek Hill is such an important player and such a dynamic piece of their offense. It's crazy to say that there's value on the under because it only takes one. It only takes one catch. It doesn't even have to be that far down the field, and he can take you 70, 80 yards in one swoop. But that, in general, if you want to talk conceptually and a little bit of math, go nerd out a little for a second here. If you look at the yards gained per catch for Tyreek Hill, on average, it's inflated by the big ones, right? And if you look at if you look at his median yards per catch versus his average yards per catch, it's gapped. You know, much more than a lot of the other players, receivers in the NFL, probably maybe the highest. I'm just speculating of the meaningful receivers. He's probably at the very, very top. What that means is that if you're doing a projection based on averages, you are potentially biasing yourself high in terms of what you're going to project. Because in reality, the median is more stable in terms of, you know, just if you're carrying out a process where you're coming up with targets, you're coming up with catches, and then you're translating that to yards gained, you know, you ought to be looking at the median, not the average, because, you know, it's biased in that regard. And there's probably value on the under for Tyreek Hill because of that, but there's more fun ways to spend your Sunday than to pray that he doesn't break a 90-yarder.
If you want to sleep through the Super Bowl, that's a good idea. But
if you're not going to watch the game, Tyreek Hill under yards, no sweat.
Honestly, I look at the numbers for all of the big receivers in this game, whether it's Hill, Kelce, Godwin, Evans, they're all high, in my opinion. I think that's commonplace in a Super Bowl, just in general, especially with a high total like this, especially where traders know what people are going to be betting in this game. Like, no one is betting these unders. Just in general, my suggestion would be to wait for a while. I've seen most of these numbers continue to increase, and I think they will continue to increase as there's even more liabilities on the overs going forwards. So you probably get a better number if you play it on Super Bowl Sunday rather than playing it today. But they are valuable unders, in my opinion. If you can hold your nose and just pray for a game where there's not a lot of big plays. And I think that's the way that both these defenses do try to play this game. Whether they can, bring that into existence or not is a different story. I think there's value on under on every one of the big receivers for each of these two teams.
Just on that too, Rob, in the last year or two, a lot more of the sports books, and it's happening stateside as well, are offering these bet builders, build your own kind of bets. And when you put all those ones in, so if you go Mahomes over yards, and then you say, okay, if Mahomes is going to hit, what is it? He's like 321 or whatever it is, or low 300s. If he's going to hit 300, okay, who's going to get those 330? Is Tyreek going to get 90? Is Kelsey going to get 70? Is McCall Hardman going to get his 35? Is Watkins going to get his 39, 40? And if you put them all together, that's why they put those numbers high, because they're just going to, your liability on these is through the roof. Even, with those bet builders, you have to acknowledge too, there's a big percentage taken by the book. Don't for a second think that you're getting good value in any of these, by the way. They're fun bets to do, but you're not getting any bit of value. They're taking a big scalper percentage off you. But that is the reason a lot of time, because people we're in the entertainment business as well. People want a fun Super Bowl. They want to see the overs. They want to see the Tyreek Hills, Kelseys, all these big names. And there's very few people are going to be just sitting back and just taking note of what the unders are on these guys. But hopefully somebody out there might just say, you might just go to bed early, bet Tyreek Hill unders, and check your phone in the morning. Grand, don't even watch the game. just one other thing I will say on this, guys, and Drew, I watch your halftime Periscope, and there are a couple of sports books on this side of the Atlantic, I'm not going to name them, but they are betting player props in play.
Wow.
And so I'll be honest, I don't think their model has kind of caught up enough, or is designed slick enough to kind of work it out. For example, Bucks get ahead. Do you want to be backing receiver overs? You're probably more likely to say, okay, straight away they're up by 14. They get the ball back next. I want to be looking at Fournette rushing overs here, Times that model doesn't really kind of adapt enough. So if you're looking around, that might be a way of looking as well. That's my general thoughts. Just one of the things I just want to get your opinions on. One I've played, and I played in the last 2 weeks, is Kelsey's overs. So the line, his receptions is 7.5. Now I know that's high, but if you looked at that game against the Bills, I think he got 13 catches. I bet this in play as well, because every time I saw him home, he's just looking for Kelsey, and he's getting off the line. No one's can seem to cover him. And that's why I don't want to play his total is 80s or the 90s. I don't want to play the over in that, but I'm a bit more confident than playing over 7.5. 8 receptions. If we say they get, we'll just say they get 9 possessions, and you want to get what we need, if you're going to get 9 possessions, how many do we need there? 1 catch per possession? It's probably not a bad one. Anyone want to turn me off that one? Because I've already bet it anyway. There's no point turning me off. I can't cash out.
No, I think in the same way we were talking about how the Tyreek prop for yardage is a little fragile because you're counting on a big one. I would say the opposite about Kelsey. His cluster of yards per catch is real tight. There's not a lot of big ones. There's not a lot of short ones. Yep. The short ones are all in the red zone, by the way.
Yeah,
worth keeping in mind, because he's, we've seen, I think, 4 or 5 high leverage games this season where Andy Reid has pulled out the good plays. And a lot of times in the red zone, the good plays have been very interesting misdirection targets to Travis Kelce. And I wouldn't be surprised if he's featured pretty heavily in the red zone for them this year, in this game. Receptions over at 7.5 makes sense to me, but the yardage too. I mean, in fact, there are some markets up where you can bet yardage players against each other, in handicapped yardage. And those are fun because that takes a little bit of the, just inflation out of it. Right. Now you're not necessarily counting on a boring game. You're actually literally saying, okay, well, is this player have an advantage matchup relative to this player? Because that's, not everyone's not everyone's going over, not everyone's going under. There's going to be, sharing, there's got to be a distribution here. And, but I do think Kelsey makes sense in those markets. I do think Kelsey yardage in general makes sense in this game. You don't have especially good linebacker coverage from this Tampa Bay unit. That's where they are the softest. I would say that about I would say that about Kansas City also. Kansas City can be attacked through the air at the linebacker position as well. I mean, I don't know if that means Gronk targets or Brait targets, but for sure, something in the short passing game, in that kind of middle of the field where Brady is most comfortable, I would expect that that's a principal component of what the Tampa Bay tries to do through the air here. And yeah, I mean, it's likely that Kelsey is featured. No one can match up with him, even if you have the best pass defense on the field. And I think what they do and the ways they utilize him in their offense are always surprising. You can't plan for it. And if it's working in the first half, the likelihood that they double down on it in the second half is good. Kind of going back to the Pat Mahomes pass attempts angle, whether the Chiefs are winning or losing in this game, is Travis Kelce a featured part of their approach? Absolutely, 100% yes. In the same way that they are passing to win, passing to get a lead, passing to put away a lead, Travis Kelce is the intended target on the majority of those passes, in my opinion.
Yeah, and just on the other side of the ball, we've a question in of Clint Richardson regards to Bucks tight ends. Is Rob Gronkowski receiving yards under 30.5 minus 105 a good look? Just my take on that one, I think Braid is getting a lot more looks. I actually like a few Braid props this season or this weekend that we'll get to in a minute, I think. But if the line seems about right, doesn't it? 30.5 on the under. Any thoughts, or shall we move on?
So go ahead, Rob.
Yeah, I mean, I have Gronk at 29 yards, so 30 and a half minus 105. Nah, I mean, I'm looking for a bigger margin when I'm betting these props.
Yeah, coming into this game, I do what I'm preaching not to do, which is kind of come up with some narrative and then go run and look for a line to bet it.
Narratives? We don't talk about
but I literally went through the thing
they're playing at home the first time ever in the Super Bowl. It's mad.
Yeah, no, but in the back of my head, I'm like, man, yeah, Brait's coming on. Gronk's not being utilized as much. Let's go bet the Brait overs and the Gronk unders, and then I go up on the book and I'm like, oh, they're both 30.
Blows up in your face. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
They're both getting used. Yeah.
I wasn't the first person to think of this, obviously. Shocking.
So look, we'll just come on. We'll do a couple of quick few more before we wrap up, guys. Highest scoring half. This is when we talked about last year. I look back at last year's Super Bowl prop. Me, you, Drew, Jesse May, and Brad Allen, and I made the point then, and I don't want to just wash, rinse, and repeat here. But for the life of me, I can't understand why the second half is the outsider in this market. No, it's not by much. There's plus money around if you shop around. Some books have it as a kind of a pick 'em either side. But if you're just kind of, and again, we don't want to get too much into game scripts, but look, first quarters of Super Bowls, if you look back the last couple of years, they haven't been absolutely electric, and that's what kills you in these. So look, anyone want to talk me out of it? If you can get this a plus money second half?
I always wonder about this Brady first quarter.
That was cool. Yeah.
And whether there's something to it or whether it's just noise. Because every time Brady's in a Super Bowl, I convince myself that there's nothing to this. It's just pure randomness. And then there's scoreless first quarter again. And it happens over and over. And just in general, I agree with what you were saying, Sully. I mean, if you just look at historically the Super Bowl first quarters, they tend to be lower scoring in general. I mean, there is an easy narrative to be drawn from there, or something that could exist, which is just that there's nerves early on in a game and offenses aren't performing at the level that you would expect them to. You can say that potentially the defense having 2 weeks to prepare for the opposing offense plays a factor early on in games, and then adjustments happen as you go on. I agree. I think the second half should be favored, in the minus 130 range over the first half, just in general. But it's tough. I mean, I'm putting some stock into the first quarter tending to be lower in Super Bowls than in regular games, and that's contributing to my number as well.
Yeah, look, it's one I played last year, and I'm quite happy to play again this year. And again, look, it's not a massive age drop. I totally take your point. In my mind, it's literally it's just the wrong side. It's just you flipping back over, and even then, I probably just wouldn't bet it. But I think it's just a small edge there. Drew, any thoughts on this one, bud?
Yeah, I agree with you. The second half should be higher scoring. As we were talking about in the game handicap, and Rob's point is right. I think the rest has a lot to do with it. The rest and preparation has a lot to do with it to make defenses look good in the early going. Tom Brady probably also handicapped because Belichick consistently deferred if they won the toss. And, there's this kind of a mentality among coaches, like we need our guys to settle into the game, like they're not being as aggressive. They're not real, there's a lot of run, pass, punt, that kind of stuff as people just kind of try to get their guys to, kind of calm down and do their jobs. But even more so, the second half makes sense to me from a higher scoring standpoint by a number of game states. One of them, Tampa Bay looks good early. Their big bodies are winning early. Those guys get tired, right? If the pass rush is winning and keeping Kansas City down, Kansas City has 10 points at halftime like last year, it's probably because the pass rush is winning some one-on-ones for Tampa Bay. Is that going to last for the entire game? No. And is Andy Reid capable of making adjustments at halftime? Yes. So the likelihood Kansas City independently goes lower scoring first half, higher scoring second half is high, in my opinion. And then in the game state where Tampa Bay gets out to a poor start and they're playing catch up in the second half and they're just throw. That also sets up pretty well. They showed us in the first game between these teams, they were able to score quickly. They put up 14 points in that fourth quarter and it was lightning fast. I think it should be favored, and I'm surprised that, I guess, because is it because it's a three-way market? Is that why
it's a two-way market.
A two-way market.
Yeah.
So
two-way market. It's still outside. It's still outside.
Wow.
But look, there are three-way markets, but I've also seen two-way markets, and it's still the dog in the two-way. So, yeah.
I don't get it.
But look at 27.5 is the first half total. So it's literally, if you're just splitting it, you're just making something favored. To my mind, it's the best to pick them, and I still believe that it should be slightly favored. So either way is, three-way or two-way, you're still backing it as the underdog, if you get me. So
yeah.
To my mind, it just seems wrong. It's literally the exact same argument we had last year, and it came up. So look, I'm not saying that will automatically happen.
There's a lot of parallels between last year's Super Bowl and this year's Super Bowl.
I think so. Yeah, I'm in agreement with you on that one. Okay, we've only got about maybe 3 more topics before we get to the best bet for each of the guys. So, Rob, there's 1 or 2 that you wanted to talk about here. No roughing the passer penalty was one you pegged with me last night. What's the story there? It's minus 180, roughly that kind of price. But what's the angle here?
I think it's priced based off of narrative a little bit. Minus 180, 64%. So I'm thinking that it's closer to 75%. As a rough estimate on there being no roughing the passer penalty. Part of it is looking at historical Super Bowls in general, but again, I'll draw on a little bit of a narrative here. I think these coaches are drilling home over the course of the last couple of weeks to not take stupid penalties in this game in general. You're not going to see like unsportsmanlike. You're not going to see any late shots on the quarterback. And I think what's driving this number and why it's set the way it is people are like, oh, it's Tom Brady. Like you touch him with your fingernail and he falls over and it's roughing the passer. And the same with Patrick Mahomes. But the reality is that we don't see roughing the passer called anywhere close to what this line is indicating right now. So not in love with it. Like I'm not saying go put everything you have on it, but I'm looking for what is mispriced in the implied probability versus what I think is the actual probability here. And I know all it takes is one bad ref to ruin your night. But I mean, this is mispriced by like at least 5%.
Stay with you for a second, Rob. Just on this one, you had another one as well. No missed point after attempt. I remember you saying this to me when I was like, I never even think about these ones. But hey, this is why you're Rob Soul, and this is why you're thinking into it. So what was the general price? I think it was minus 250 you quoted to me last night. Minus 250,
71.4%. It's higher than this. The PATs are, I know they're not a gimme anymore, but like we're not playing in Green Bay at Lambeau Field here where the wind is going to be like absolutely insane for the game or anything like that. This is a price that's just it's mispriced again. And this is a common theme. Like I find this in the Super Bowl every single year. Nobody wants to lay minus 250 on something like this. Like that's just the reality of the way that a recreational bettor thinks. It's like, why am I going to lay like minus 1,000 on there to be no safety in the game? Well, because it should be like minus 4,000. That's why you're going to lay that number. People are always looking to the underdog side because they want to cash a bigger ticket. It's the lottery mentality, right? So to me, this is like pretty grossly mispriced as well here. I mean, I don't have much more to say to. I'm not going to break down PATs over the course of the year or anything like that.
Why not?
That's
Sommer, you're a guy who would play at minus 250 or minus 180. You bet those, right?
So I can totally get behind Rob's logic. Minus 250 looks very, very, very low.
It's a fun one to be sweating out, Sommer. It is a fun one. You just don't even want touchdowns. Great, yeah. Don't even want those attempts. Drew, I think you had another one that we didn't have on our agenda there. I haven't seen the price for it, but go on, take it away. What was the other one you saw there?
I was just curious if you had, DPI. Carl Cheffers is the head ref here. His crew is pretty tough on DPI for whatever it's worth. So if there's just a penalty yardage over market, I'm interested. If there's a DPI specific market, I'm interested.
I haven't seen it offhand, but like you said, there's only about 16,000 props out there, so chances are I'm going to miss a few of them every now and again.
You got some big physical corners for the Kansas City Chiefs too. Kansas City Chiefs are going to get called for DPI in this game. So
I actually really like that that you brought that up, Drew, because I think it lends itself to a prop that I like, which is both QBs as the first TD scorer and both QBs as an anytime TD scorer. Because people are like, what are the chances that the ball gets down to the 1 yard line? It's like, it's actually way higher than you realize just in general, especially when you have a crew that calls a lot more pass interference. Brady is very much known to sneak it from the goal line in general. Would not be surprised at that at all. If a play breaks down for Mahomes, and they do pass on the goal line a lot as well, he'll run it in, no problem either. So to me, I'm looking at those markets, and I think quarterbacks are underpriced to score touchdowns in this game.
I just want to stay with that, so if you don't mind, Joe, and I might come back to you in a second about that, but even the touchdown score markets, one I liked as well, and I think you can only back it at 4.0 or plus 400, is Cameron Braid. And we kind of touched on it earlier. He's just getting way more red zone targets, and the Chiefs haven't been exceptionally strong against tight ends this season. So I think, Brady could look to him, the short yardage. So that's one for me. Anything else touchdown-wise? Would you be I know you were kind of hot enough on Sammy Watkins. He's not a guy that always kind of gets into the end zone or has a high click there, but anyone that kind of jumped out at you even at a bigger price, Sommer?
I think I saw Watkins at plus 400, something like that. So that doesn't look like a bad look either, I would guess. And I think Drew mentioned it prior to this podcast, if there are any DPI numbers. And what I've realized throughout the playoffs is that refs are not calling any DPIs anymore. I think we had like 3 or 4 DPIs in the entire playoffs. And we had like an average of 8 to 10 over the last 10 years. So if there are any DPI props like Drew has asked, I think that would be a solid look for the under.
Yeah, I'm surprised if nobody offers them, because like at the end of the day, there are just so many props out there that somebody has to have them somewhere. I haven't seen one offhand, but there was another one. Touchdown markets. Anyone else, guys? Braid for me was a good one. I think you can back him at 22.0 first touchdown. But anyone even kind of off the radar? Rob, you obviously made a good case for both quarterbacks as rushing. Drew, anyone wide receivers wise or tight end wise that kind of jumped out at you?
No, I thought those markets were priced pretty fairly, and it's I don't 100% get why this has kind of taken off and been such a fun, such a focused on market over the primetime games this year. But the first touchdown score market all of a sudden is like highly liquid.
You know why, Drew? I mean, it's the long shot mentality, right? No one's betting the starting running back and the number one receiver. Everybody's looking for the third string tight end or number 4 receiver in a goal line package. And that's what it comes down to. People want to put down $10 to win 150, not 10 to win 5.
Yeah, I'll tell you this much, Rob. They ain't betting no missed point after attempts either, buddy. So that's why they're betting first touchdown scores. But you're right. Look, some people, their bankroll isn't, that significant. That's fine. They just want that kind of that $5 to win 20 or to win 100. Look, that's absolutely fine as well. Okay, guys. I think we're almost out of time. We've talked about a lot. I'm going to just do a quick recap as well, just before we get the best bets, because there's a lot there. I'm just going to rattle through them. Like I said, if you don't get what I'm saying here, there'll be a post on insights.matchbook.com. I'll share it on my own Twitter channel. I'll tag the guys as well. just what I've taken away from this, book QBs to score a touchdown. From Rob just said it there a while ago. Great anytime touchdown score for me. Super Bowl MVP to be a quarterback. Again, look, there'll be different markets for that. If your book or a Matchbook will be offering that market, you can Dutch both Mahomes and Brady. Just look up a Dutching calculator. If you got 100 quid to stake, it will divide that money accordingly to give you the right number. Mahomes over 41.5 passing attempts. Fournette over 3.5 receptions. Watkins over 39.5 receiving yards. Le'Veon Bell rushing under anything. If there's a number, if it's 0.5, bet the under. Le'Veon Bell under there. Kelsey for me over 7.5 receptions. Second half, the highest scoring half. I will go to my grave with that one. No roughing the passer, -180, and no miss PAT, -250. Hey, they're short, man, but they're winners. They're winners. Rob told you as much. Don't forget, Matchbook will have a lot of those props up on site. If you have not got a Matchbook account today, what are you doing? And I'll be honest, guys, if you're betting the sides, if you're betting the totals, if you're betting the money lines, the point spreads on this, if you're not betting a Matchbook, you're probably getting screwed somewhere because it's the best value out there. If you haven't got an account today, sign up at matchbook.com. Your first bet, it has to be over odds at 2.0, that's even money, or over £10. You get your next bet, 10 quid as well, that your bet will be matched. That is 18s plus only. Please do gamble responsibly at all times for Super Bowl week. Best bet of all that, guys. What are you thinking? Rob Pizzola, take it away. What's your absolute best bet, the banker?
I'm going to throw one that we didn't talk about. Tom Brady over half an interception. I think that should be priced at -200. It's priced -150 in most spots. I just really like it. I do think Brady's going to face pressure in this game, for one. I think that Kansas City's going to try to get some pressure up the middle. He's going to try to get the ball out quick, make some risky passes over the middle of the field. So that plays into it in general. I also think that there is like more than a 50% chance that the fourth quarter game state here is the Bucs playing from behind, where he's forced to throw pretty heavily and forced to be aggressive downfield. And we did see in the first matchup, the defensive line for the Chiefs was able to get pressure up the middle, tip some balls. I think they're disruptive in this game, and that's been the strength of the Chiefs defense the entire year, is the defensive line, especially up the middle, getting in the face of quarterbacks. So I think Brady's throwing an interception in this game. So whether that's over half or Brady, yes, interception, I think anything under -200 is value.
Sumi, your best bet for Super Bowl 55?
I'm going with Sammy Watkins over 39.5.
Okay, and yeah, as a few people said in the chat, that number is kind of lower in a few places, but Suma 39.5, you're getting plus money with that one as well. I saw that earlier. Drew, your best bet for Super Bowl 55, Matt?
I'm going to go with Bill Belichick mentioned on the broadcast over 1 at -315. This is a free roll. It's a free roll because they're saying Belichick won, so then you just need him to say it a second time at some point during the game. No, it's
podcast. I knew you wouldn't. We didn't talk about Gatorade color, time of the national anthem. We did very well.
I'm going to go with Mahomes pass attempts market number right now. I'm seeing 41.5. As I mentioned, I think this is resilient to game state, and Mahomes has a day, and I mean, really, what we should really be talking about is Chiefs three-peat.
Yeah,
Chiefs are going to be so good with Mahomes. Like they didn't even have an offensive line for most of this year. Like it's pretty scary what this team is going to be for the next decade.
They didn't lose either of their top coordinators either. Somehow they're running it back.
Yeah,
unbelievable.
Dan Campbell got the job in Detroit.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, there's a few of those head scratching ones. Right, my best bet, and I will die on this hill, as I said, second half, high scoring half should not be the underdog. And if it goes off at 1.8, then I'll probably leave it. But the fact that it's an underdog right now, it's been a bet for me last year and this year instead. Guys, we're out of time. Season is done. I just want to say, guys, Drew, you were with us last season. It was great to have you along again this year. Suma, fantastic addition. Thanks so much, mate. Matchbook Insights felt like a 75% hit rate or 77% season. Crazy stuff.
In the NFL? No.
Yeah, it's free. A weekly pick. This guy.
I think he got screwed a couple weeks too with a push on a late bet or something like that. So it's pretty absurd here.
It's absolutely tremendous. One of our better free agent signings, definitely on Matchbook Insights. Rob, it's been an absolute pleasure as well, Rob. I'm hoping to get you on a bit more next season, but we will come back to that. But just personally, guys, and I'm going to speak for a lot of the audience, thanks so much for the content you provided us all season long. I know the whole world is kind of in lockdown, but I know personally for me, hanging out with you guys every Wednesday evening is an absolute pleasure and a treat. And to be honest, I do this for free. It's nice to probably get a salary with it too, but just getting the opportunity to talk to you guys and pick your brains, it's an absolute pleasure. And best of luck with your Super Bowl bets. And to our audience out there, thanks so much for sticking with us all season long. You have been fantastic. You have been really great to us, and we appreciate all the comments, the interactions on social and whatnot. We feel there's a real community here with our NFL product at the moment, and we're delighted to have you on board. And you know what, guys? Big game coming. Let's leave it on a winner. Leave it all out on the table, and then we'll be back again for next season. Go well at the weekend. Here we go.